Welcome. My name is Clemens Fastas. I'm program manager at the Connected Framework, responsible for the community, the broad reach community interaction of the product team itself and that means with you. My job is to take your input and help us building better products. And our team is, or our division, is the one that actually built all those web services standards in collaboration with industry partners. Don Box, who co-invented SOAP, is working in our division now. We have a lot of people in who worked on the RSS and getting RSS into the community. So we have a lot of things that we've done from people in our division to really to drive the data, drive all this information into the community and actually make those things happen. So we are server people. Unlike most of the things, most of the talks you will hear in these 3 days, we are really talking about the server side and what the server side can do or contributes to building the Web 2.0 experience. So what we've seen is a drive from HTML, from the HTML-driven web to really a service-driven web. So what I'm going to show you is a number of demos, a number of things, how you can combine, how you can drive things from the server side, how you can build experiences which rely really on a lot of server-side information, a lot of server-side technology, and we have built technology that will help you to do that. So let us go a little bit into the history of all those things and where we are now. Hypertext and pictures grew the web, and they still are very important. Thank you to all those technologies. It was a wonderful ride. They're here to stay, of course, but we need to move on. Hypertext by itself is a wonderful content aggregation and layout technology. Still, if you just do hypertext, it's very 90s. What the effect of all that is your content links to their content, you give people links, and then you drive them off your property. So if you're really interested in interacting with what other people have to provide, then you basically lose the customer to their site. One example, let's say you want to sell books through the Amazon Partner Program. Right? You set up your own portal, you make it, you put some editing into it, you try to drive revenue through the Amazon Partner Program through your site. Well, if you just use the hyperlink API, you send people to a special portal that Amazon gives you, but if they don't happen to really buy off that portal, but sort of roam around in the site and then probably say, oh, I want to do something else, and then go off Amazon and then come back eventually, all that is gone. So we don't want to lose people on the path, right? You are creating experiences, you're creating content, you're aggregating content, and there's a provider in the back who's providing added value services to your site for which you are doing a custom experience where you have context that you provide, which probably they do not provide. But essentially, if we only rely on the hyperlink model, you are losing customers. And that's something that's really driving, in parts, the Web 2.0 thing. It turns out that HTML is also interesting not only because it drives the browser as a layout experience or as a layout language, but it also holds data. So if you have a paragraph tag and that contains data, you can go parse it out. So a friend of mine runs Corzen.com. Corzen.com is a company that's located in New York City. And what they're doing as a business model is they're aggregating from over 500 different job sites, from Monster.com and the big job sites to a lot of corporate job sites. They're mining them. He actually has a bunch of people whose only work during the day is writing regex scripts. And they're going and mining those sites with permissions, and it turns out that some of their customers are some of the sites they scrape. They know better about some of their customers, what they have in their databases, than the customers do themselves. So they're doing very broad analysis. It turns out that just by scraping sites, just by using the web as a database, by what they aggregate, what they do in their analytics, they have become a leading indicator for Wall Street. They can predict with astonishing precision what the job market data of the US is going to be next week or in 2 weeks. So they're selling their data to hedge funds, to all sorts of different Wall Street companies, and to job sites. They have a broad customer spectrum because they're using the web as a database. Do you have any things like this, any stories to tell? This would be your opportunity to share them. See, it's a 72-hour conversation.
Yes, it's quite a conversation. No, don't have any.
All right, fine. So Corzine does that really, that's a Web 2.0 model. That's a Web 2.0 model that's not using AJAX or any of the experiences. They're just using the web as a database. XML is generalized parsable markup. So XML makes those things easier because it actually gives us schema, it gives us metadata describing those sites. Because it turns out that Corzine has a huge problem. And that's every site changes because it's focused on the layout. So they keep changing their scripts, they keep changing all that information that's driving their backend services all the time. While they're really providing valuable data. They're providing valuable data actually for their customers. So it turns out that by now, the customers are advising them when they do layout changes. And of course, it would be a lot better if, and some sites do that, would give them XML data that they could parse out. XML, the wonderful thing about XML is that XML facilitates community standards. RSS and OPML have never seen a standardization committee. RSS and OPML, those two standards grew out of Userland, a company that was run by Dave Weiner, who also co-authored with Don Box the SOAP standard. And they were just there, and since they were there, people were using them. And now they have become the de facto standard, but it's not always necessary to wait for the W3C to bless things. And in that way, in the XML world, we are where we used to be in the HTML world in the mid-90s, where something comes up, people find that useful and use it. So it's a very pragmatic way of dealing with data. It's a very pragmatic way of just doing stuff. And that's the just doing stuff that really drives the Web 2.0 model, because now the industry has understood that we can do things better together than everybody trying to build the internet super powerhouse where I own the world. So collaboration is facilitated by using XML. It turns out that no matter what sort of markup you punt up, your site is already a service. So our story and our desire is to make your sites even better services, to give you better tools, to actually get that data out there, to provide the services. The motivation for that is mashup. And that's a term that you have certainly already heard. I have a few examples of mashup, so let's just go and click those. So the first one is vlog map. I'm a big fan of video blogging, and you're going to see why. You're also going to see why I'm wearing this t-shirt here, which only very few of you will make any sense of at this point. So it's a vlog map. Vlogs are video weblogs. And if I zoom in into any region of the world, and apparently that's Google Maps. So let's go and zoom in on something. Oh, that was water. So let's try that. So there's a few people. And as you zoom in, you get more data, get more bloggers. So it's using geo information that the bloggers are putting into their feeds, and it's just merging that with Google Maps, which is a very nice thing. And then you can click in, you can find the blogs, and you can link to them. And it gives you interesting context for what you're going to see on video. Right? Video is a different medium, and video gives you, and if you know where the people are, you get a lot more context. So that's a very interesting thing. Another cool site, which is aggregating content in a different way, is Flash Earth. Flash Earth is a Flash app. And what that does is it's using Google data, or it's using Windows Live local data. So it turns out that this here is Düsseldorf Airport. That's where I'm from, and I live sort of, if it lets me, I live sort of down here in that little village. And as I zoom out, now it's loading more images. Let's zoom out a little more so we get to see where we are. So we're in Europe, that's Germany, and that's Holland, it's Denmark. And this site here will actually work with Live Local as well. So here's the Microsoft data for that. The other one is the Google data for that. And that's a Flash app. It's also mashing up content from other sites, and it's integrating those. So that's a very, very nice thing, too. Then there's WeatherBonk, and that's the last time I'm going to show here. And WeatherBonk also goes and aggregates a lot of information into, again, Google Maps, and you get pictures from places so you know how they are, and that's actually current webcams, so you can go and see how the weather correlates to the pictures, and that's really, really nice. Another way of aggregating is, and there's a lot of talk about Xbox 360 here nowadays. So there's an app from Untitled.net, which is the Xbox 360 tracker, because someone wrote this app to figure out where he can buy the Xbox 360. And it turns out it's so hard to get that he wrote a little app to it using Best Buy as his backend. So what he's doing is you can say, oh, so here's in Redmond, so let's say he's in Snohomish up in Washington. Right, so I'm saving this data. And the status, now it's going to go and fetch, well, it turns out that's all in the same place. 10, so that's where I lived, in New York City. So let's see what that gives. Refresh. No Xbox 360 in Manhattan, huh? So he's checking Best Buy, he's checking Circuit City, and the thing is really not available. So if it was available, then it would show how many items are in stock, and then you can rush and go and buy one. Okay, that's another mashup thing, right? It's mashing up information, but it's mashing it up in a smart client. A great directory. That's a link you want to probably write down. Is programmableweb.com. There's a lot of links to resources. There's a lot of examples of those sites which do those mashup things. So mashup consumers, and there's a business story to all of this. Mashup consumers, your content is your content, the stuff you provide. Their content, someone else's content, and yet someone else's content. And the key part here is that you're not stealing that data. They will actually let you use that data because there's a business model there for you, and there's a business model there for them, right? All the technology coolness aside, there's got to be a business model right there. So as a mashup consumer, meaning you're building a mashup site, the goal is to keep people on your property. You will typically be driven by ad revenue. Or if you're not driven by ad revenue, you will be using content to serve your customers better. If you are a travel site and you are offering travel services, last-minute travel, right? It would be great if you can include weather services, if you include links to and aggregated information about local transport, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So create added value information straight with your user experience. Don't link there, embed it. So that's what the little graphic is saying. There's external content, embed that content. And the business model here is varying, right? If you have Best Buy, as in this case, they will be very happy if you facilitate sales for them. So they are smart if they let you. Amazon is a great example for that. Amazon is freely giving you, all the web services information because eventually they're going to sell stuff to your customers, and that's good for them. Another model would be to make that data available only for your site, and you end up paying for it. That's fine. So you get data to mash into your site, and your partners get business. Mashup providers, on the other side, your content is their content, and what you need to do is you need to really make it easy to aggregate whatever stuff you have. And you can go with the community standards, right? RSS, OPML. You can aggregate Atom. Atom is the IETF ratified version, much cleaner version of RSS. But here again, the critical mass is on the side of RSS. Well, the cleaner technology is really Atom. So we're going to see a side-by-side of those things for a while. Then AJAX is one format that I put up here, which is sort of a little Windows specific, but it is an XML dialect. And that is the advanced streaming metadata format for Windows Media Player. We're going to see an example of that. And really any other XML lingo. If you just put up a schema, you put up some XML data, that's good, but you should have consumable XML endpoints where people can get your data and leave the rendering up to them. You can alternatively also give them pre-rendered content that's aggregatable, such as Virtual Earth or Windows Live Local and Google Maps. So what you also need to provide is a public API. A public API can be as simple as simply walking up to an endpoint and saying, HTTP get URI. And there you have it. Does it need to be more complicated than that? No. I think an endpoint and an HTTP method, and if that's only get, that's a wonderful public API. We don't really need to have more of that. RSS is a public API. REST, and I'm going to talk about those things in a little more detail, is also a public API. You're going to hear what that is. And of course, SOAP services are also a public API, which lets you shape sort of that API in a more API fashion, in a richer way. But POX is just as good, depending on the content that you have, as a very rich SOAP service. And as a mashup provider, why you want to provide that data, and there was, in the previous panel discussion, there was a question about this, is I'm running a site that does classified ads. So what do I gain? Well, you gain that if you are charging your customers for the classified ads, if that's your model, well, then your customers are really really interested to get their classified ads out into the world. So make your classified ads as aggregatable as anyhow possible, right? Just push them out and have other people aggregate them into their sites, let them correlate with local data, try to get as much metadata in it as you can. So if someone from Redmond, Washington puts in a classified ad, put that metadata alongside with the data, so geo-oriented sites like the map sites, they can actually show that. If you have a classified ad site and you are selling real estate, just put all of that metadata along with it, because someone will have housingmaps.com, for instance, that's one of those sites. They actually associate the property that's on the market with maps and all this additional information. So that's a good story. Whatever data you have, if that data is good for someone else to consume, think hard about what to do with that data. Do you want to sell that data? And that is compatible with that model. Is that data really only driving your business? Well, then just make it available. But make it available in a format that's easily aggregatable. And that is XML. That's easy parsable. That's stable. That you can define, where you can provide an API and a definition in the form of an SDK or just a set of documentation to let other people talk to you. So really, it's all a mix. It's all a mix of different technologies. The core platform here is AJAX. And AJAX is really asynchronous JavaScript and anything, right? The core driver for all of this is Microsoft technology from 1997, which is fun. XML HTTP, which has been the underlying technology for Outlook web access, as Bill Gates pointed out in his keynote, for a long time, is really driving this Web 2.0 story. And it does so because now we have critical mass. It used to be a Microsoft-only technology supplied as an ActiveX control, and luckily, Firefox, Safari, Opera, they just took that object model and put it straight into their object models, into their programmability models. With that, Google figured out, hey, all of a sudden we can use this, and the first app that I've seen, and the first app that many people have seen, is Google Suggest. All of a sudden, Google Suggest did all this magic, and everybody was thinking, how did they implement that combo box? And then shortly thereafter came Google Maps, and everybody realized, whoa. And then as people were looking into it and said, XML HTTP, they were kind of stunned that Google would actually come out with this. So that was interesting. And another thing we need to be thankful for to Firefox and Safari and Opera is that they finally kicked Netscape 4 off the cliff. Because the DHTML work that we're doing would be pretty much impossible if Netscape 4 was still broadly distributed, because you can bash IE as much as you like, but Netscape 4, man. So with the technology, with that critical mass in the browser space, we can now build those sites. The technology has been out for a while, but now only now we have the critical mass to actually go and do all this embedding and layering, extending, and all those things. But it's not the only thing. As I showed you, and that's why I showed you the Flash Earth demo, all this data is not only there for web apps, but it's also there and consumable by local applications. You can do a lot cooler experience, without a doubt, with Avalon or Flash, because they're relying on the power that the PC has. Windows Mobile and J2ME, Java 2 Mobile Edition, those two platforms give you access to mobile devices. We all know that with the form factors that you have with the small devices, an HTML experience isn't that rich, and there's just constraints that you have in terms of processing power, there's constraints that you have in terms of the rendering capabilities of the browsers and the JavaScript capabilities of the browsers that an HTML and the connectedness or disconnectedness of those devices, right? That it's probably better and likely better to do local applications on those platforms, and therefore you can aggregate this content, cache this content locally with those two development platforms, and these are targets, consumption targets. Windows Media Center and Xbox 360. That's also an interesting aspect. How do we get experiences onto those two platforms? How do we get experiences into the living room? And there's a reason why I have this remote control here, because I'm showing you how to drive really those experiences into the living room. So the web of now, or the web that we're currently building, is a web of services. It's growing into a web of services, and we just have many presentation surfaces and many presentation facets. It's not an HTML story anymore. It's not even a DHTML story anymore. It's really about the data that we're driving out into space, into the internet space, and who's collecting that data and who's aggregating that data. And my personal prediction, is that we're going to see mashup data providers as well. That we're going to see mashup sites who are not focusing really on the presentation aspect, but they're rather focused on, for instance, the analysis aspect. Let's go back to Corzen.com, right? Corzen currently mines the data of the internet. Their strength is not the spidering. Their strength is they are very, very smart in the analysis they do. That analysis data, they're providing to their partners. They are doing mashup on the data layer. So there's a separation happening of presentation and data. There's an invisible web being built today. I had basically the same slide in a slide deck 4 years ago, and that was all vision. The vision is gone. That's reality now. But we see a separation of data and presentation. That's what makes this so important for us, and that's where we really come into play with our technologies. So HTML isn't dead, but it's got a lot of company, and it's got a lot of, there's a lot of additional aspects to the web as we know it, and to the established stack. I'm not talking away HTTP, I'm not talking away XML, I'm not talking away any of those technologies, but I'm just saying it's not only for the browser. So what do we have? We have HTML, HTTP are the common fabric of the web. It's like the denim jeans, right? Everybody has them. They're not so chic. It's the essential, that's the basics. Everybody's got to have an HTML site. Everybody's got some way to get the data out in that way. What HTML does and why we can't really talk it away and why it's not going away is because it provides us the fundamental container to do stuff. If you're building a very cool Flash site, that Flash site is contained in a bit of HTML. If you're doing a Windows Forms application, you deploy it with click once, well, your landing page is HTML. So HTML is the universal container and the universally understood lingua franca. That's the basic for everything. HTTP is the ubiquitous, scalable communication protocol. There's a huge support in the infrastructure. HTTP is just baked into a lot of hardware. The whole internet is built on the fact that there's so much HTTP out there. Because routers understand it. Because routers, hardware is able to sense, for instance, HTML traffic and compress it. So all those things are abilities, capabilities of the network that we certainly want to utilize. It's great for 90% of everything, but it's not the only thing. Once we get into things like large data, then you certainly get into the place where you're aborting downloads. Once you get into places like peer-to-peer, you want to reach out to the client. Well, the client needs to be an HTTP server. That's not so good. All of a sudden you get into things like polling, and it's difficult. So we need to have additional communication protocols, streaming protocols. We need to have able to do conversations and not only do monologues. We need to have more reliability. HTTP, the underpinning of HTTP is TCP, which is an inherently reliable protocol. It makes you, if it loses packages, it will recover from that. It will create a reliable stream connection, but HTTP abstracts all of that away. So we need to have capabilities to add that reliability back into the story. REST POX. POX, plain old XML, that's one of the current hip words. If we're talking about POX, we're talking about RSS, really. RSS is the driver for that. RSS is, POX, the idea is you simply walk up to an endpoint, you say, get, and then you get some XML back, right? It's just XML, no SOAP, no envelopes, none of that stuff. And it's not dogmatic. You just go and just get some data. If you want to update some data, you just do a post, and that's fine. You send it. It's very easy, and it's totally AJAX friendly. AJAX is driven by the idea of POX. Because use XML HTTP, put in a URL, set the method, or just let it, because get is the default, and there's your XML. So that's what's really driving the story. POX is also, in part, a story of non-XML formats. Right? It's talking about, so we're talking not too much talking about XML here, but really about the delivery method. URI, HTTP, all fine. Then there's REST. REST is representational state transfer. What REST does, it fully exploits the HTTP model as an application protocol. RFC 2616 is incredibly rich in what it actually defines in terms of return codes, of what it actually defines in methods, what the implications of those methods are. It's a very, very rich model. Very few people really use it to that maximum extent. There's a whole school about what the difference is between put and post and how you're supposed to respond. And it's a great way to build apps if you're really drilling down into all the details of HTTP. And many people, the loudest proponents of REST, say the world needs nothing but HTTP. So they're driving really HTTP as an application model, and why they're saying REST, or why they're calling this in a special way, is because they want to drive the idea of that as an application model into the community. It's nothing else but just the POX support. If you look at it from a HTTP GET perspective, it's the exact same thing. Where things start to differ is when you get into the whole update story. Update, create, delete, and how you're supposed to handle those things. And that requires a lot of reading if you really want to write a REST compliant service. So there's a lot of dogma associated with REST. Essentially, they're the same thing, but POX is just do something that works, and REST is about do something that works precisely to the words of the specification. And it's all up to the respective implementer or architect to decide what the preference is. The preference on the internet, in practice, seems to be on the side of POX, and seems to be on, let's just do whatever works. Oops, different machine. Another way to cross the wire is SOAP. And of course, we're big on SOAP because we've co-invented and worked on SOAP. We've built all those 150,240 WS standards. And they are good. They're really good for scenarios where you really need to relay that metadata. SOAP is a container. SOAP is an envelope. You have a letter, and you stick that letter into an envelope. What does the envelope give you? It gives you a brand new white sheet of paper that you can write annotations on. Annotations that are necessary to get things from A to B. And the analogy is really that of the postal service. Right? You write an address, a sender address on it, you write a receiver address on it, you put licenses on it so that and that would be post stamps, licenses on it so that the data can be sent. There's quality of service stickers. You can, with a postal mail, you put airmail on it. You make it certified mail or certified mail with return receipt, which is analogous to WS reliable messaging, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of analogies there. And if you need any of those features that require that you send metadata around, you need to have a place to put that metadata. And that happens to be SOAP. SOAP is an envelope standard. WS addressing takes that envelope standard and turns it into a messaging standard. But if you don't have metadata, if all you need is to walk up to your URL and say, please get me the data, you don't need to have all that SOAP, all of that metadata container. A SOAP message with an empty header section is useless. Right? It's there to carry metadata. So we have put a lot of work into making addressing work to make things routable. We have a lot of in-message security. We have this whole identity federation framework, which includes ultimately also InfoCard. We have reliable messaging. We have transaction flow. We have all sorts of things. And if you want to take messaging up the stack and make it more robust and make it more interoperable, yes, then you have to use SOAP. For the simple things, for the AJAX types of application, SOAP is not the right tool. just punting XML data around may be the right tool. But even in use cases where you need to have simple data integration, sometimes SOAP is a better option if you need reliability, for instance. So it's a very rich model, requires rich stacks, and SOAP has become pretty complicated. It's no longer a toddler. It's no longer really easy. And that makes it really difficult to parse from the browser. So for us, the world is we embrace all of those things. There's a lot of data going around. If you heard the keynote, there's a lot. The BBC says they're saying we see a lot of assets that are being sent out in terms of rich media. We have media streams, we have videos, we have audio streams, video streams. We have large downloads and all those things. Then there's this whole space of peer-to-peer, peer-to-peer collaboration, sharing, gaming, and all those things. And of course, all of that is communication as well. So in the past, that was all very difficult to do on the server side, to write the support infrastructure on the server side. If you were doing peer-to-peer, well, then you were rolling your own framework or using some framework that was out there. If you want to do the streaming, then you would basically be constrained to either use HTTP and then implement your chunking logic and very complicated additional logic so you can have resumable downloads, or you would run your own TCP protocols. If you were doing POX, you would do one thing. If you were doing web services, you would do another thing. If you had to communicate in a fast way with someone else where you are reliant on rich metadata that needs to be communicated, but you're worried about the XML footprint, then you would use yet another technology, right? In the Java space and in the .NET space, we have each, you can correlate them, sort of 5 major APIs, which satisfy most of those scenarios, but you have to learn all those APIs. So we have been thinking, and it came out of that thinking, came out the Windows Communication Foundation. The Windows Communication Foundation is the universal communication runtime for all of those scenarios. On Windows, of course. So if you're building a Windows server, going forward, with Vista, where the Windows Communication Foundation is going to be available on Windows XP, Windows Server 2003, and Windows Vista. And we're deprecating, right, the existing stacks. We're not pulling them. You can still use them. It's no problem. Going forward, we're investing into that one communication runtime, which is going to be shipping with Windows Vista, and it does all those things. We have support for SOAP, very strong. We have support for REST, for POX, for peer-to-peer, for streaming. We have all those different communication shapes. We have one-way messages and request-response. We have duplex conversations. We have transaction support. We have reliable messaging support and all those things. And there's one way to program. And that's the important thing. There's one way to program. One way to program means one way to learn, right? One API to learn, one class library to learn, and you program your applications in one way, and you can expose them in different ways. So to make that point, let me go and switch to a little service here, which I'm going to have running. I'm not going to bore you with typing code, so I'm just using the pre-baked demo as I have it. Here's an interface that implements IWS transfer in a very simple way. It's get, and it returns a message. That's the way how we define interfaces in Indigo, or in the Windows Communication Foundation. Indigo is our code name. And so we define contracts. Contract means we declare what the runtime is going to be doing, which method it has, and if it receives a message, what's going to be happening with that message. That contract says whatever incoming message arrives, please execute the get method, and then have that return a message, and that message goes back to the client. It turns out that an HTTP GET is a message. So we can map that HTTP GET message, even though it has no body, but it is a message, we can map that to the service. So let's see the implementation of it. It's very simple. I'm going to show the more complicated part a little later. So this service implements this interface, and it creates a local XML reader, which reads an RSS feed, just a document, creates a message within and returns that message. And in the program, we're starting the two services. We're starting this POX service, and we're starting a SOAP service. So let me just do that. Let me just run it. So we have a service hosted on 8080, and we have a service hosted on 8081 and 82 and 83. So let's go and walk up to it. Localhost 8080. This is the IE view for RSS. So what we just got was an RSS feed, POX and SOAP RSS feed, WCF adds huge value to RSS, what is what that says. So if I go and view the source, there's our RSS. That's the data that we got, and IDE is so nice to actually go and convert that for us. Now, so far, little surprise. So we can build services, and you can talk to those services. That's something you could already do with some other things. Let's go and let's inspect this service. What does it do? The Windows Communication Foundation is built it's built by default to support SOAP, because we're very strong on SOAP. However, we have a very rich model for you to be able to extend that platform and to let it do other things. So what we have here is a so-called POX binding. And the binding, Indigo is all about ABC, right? Think Sesame Street, think Ernie and Bert and all those things, ABC. Address, binding, contract. Contract is the declaration of what we want to talk about. Address is where we want to talk, So that's the addressing information. Binding is the stuff in the middle that connects the contract, that connects your implementation to that address. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be happening in the middle. And we allow you to reconfigure this and to do, for instance, this here, get POX binding. So you use the HTTP transport, and then you're adding what we call the POX encoding binding element here, and that's really part of the source code, and we're going to post that source code, actually an updated version of the source code. And this exchanges the encoder inside Indigo. What is an encoder? The encoder is the thing that takes the message that we have internally and puts it on the wire. So what we're doing here is we're taking our SOAP messages that flow through Indigo and just take the body out and just serialize the body. And there you have POX. So we're so pluggable that we can very, very easily satisfy that scenario and very many other scenarios. Now let's assume we want to talk with IE in a different way. Now what we have, and what's also be part of the sampled, is that I say WS HTTP. Now that's pretty boring. I get the same output. We have created, part of the samples, a pluggable protocol handler for IE, which now will talk SOAP. So we're using client extensibility, and now all of a sudden, IE is really speaking through SOAP channel. And you can add reliable messaging there. You can use all those advanced web services features to integrate with, in this case, the Windows platform. If you're worried about network footprint for your apps, well, then you could go and say net.tcp, and we're walking up to 83. And again, now we've done a binary TCP invocation using binary on-the-wire encoding to talk to that service. And that's a pretty astonishing story, too. So we have SOAP, we have binary, we have POX. So what did just happen here? We have Sorry for the graphics, but I needed to stick with the ink story, right? So we have IE talking with HTTP through an address that has a binding associated with it. We talk w.http, we talk net.tcp, and all of those calls end up at different addresses with different bindings, with different configurations, with different feature sets that you can have, but there's only one implementation of that very service. So depending on what sort of wire qualities you want to have, of what you want to have on the wire, what you want to have in terms of data encoding, meaning do you want to have plain XML, or do you want to have SOAP? And if you want to have SOAP, then I assume that you want to have richer services, and the richer services is something that you can provide, in this case, through the pluggability, the extensibility of the IE model, if you wanted to, or by the extensibility of, or the interoperability with local client code, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But on the server side, there's one way to program. I didn't have to do anything, I just put different faces on top of it. And what we could also do here, which I'm not showing in this demo, is you can actually reconfigure those services. Everything you can do in programming in terms of configuring those services, you can also do in config. You can write a configuration file and just make it behave differently. But there's only one way to program. We have only one service, and that communicates in very many, very different ways. As I said, only a matter of configuration. You program your model in one model. WCF, writing WCF services, is the natural first choice for supplying data for AJAX applications. It's a natural first choice for supplying data to smart clients. It's for web services, and it's, of course, big in integration, integrating services, in building those aggregation services. We've invested a lot of time to make the server side as flexible as it can be, because we know that there's just a wide variety of clients, wide variety of communication needs that you have, and you cannot always anticipate what those are. So we made our platform as extensible as possible. So one of the things that I'm not showing here, but that we'll also pointed to, I believe, on windowscommunication.net, is a JSON channel, right? JavaScript object notation, which renders not XML, but it really renders data in JSON, in the JSON notation. And Steve Main wrote that, and he has it on his blog, and I think we're already linking to that from windowscommunication.net. If we don't, we will soon. So there are so many possible points of failure in this app or in this demo, I can't tell you. I am very worried. All right, let me just try. This is an app that I wrote for my own purposes. The reason why I'm wearing this shirt is this is my football team, right? My soccer, sorry. Yeah, I have a different opinion about real football than other people in the room. And so do my British friends and Irish friends in the room, and from other parts of Europe. So I'm working for Microsoft for 2 months now. And I eventually will move to Redmond. That's a problem. It's a problem because of football. Because you don't really get the weekend fix. Because they don't show, they show the big games here, but they don't show my team. That's my team. We're doing okay, but we're not, the biggest team in the league, so we don't get as much coverage. So the question was, my task that I gave myself was, how can I fix this? So this is actually, for me, a good test of how I could fix that. So let's go and let's restart the experience. And I'm very nervous right now because what you're seeing, all the data that is hopefully coming is coming from my house in Germany. So I have a server set up. Everything that you see on screen at this point comes through WCF channels, pictures included. So we're loading, I'm freshly loading that data. It has expired on me, of course, now because I've been talking more than an hour. These are all RSS feeds, which time out after about 60 minutes. So while that's going on, I'm going to explain what you're seeing. You're seeing Windows Media Center. Windows Media Center is hosting a page. That page is served up by my home server. My home server has a 3 megabit downstream, 512 kilobits upstream feed at home. So this is now in Düsseldorf. We're pulling this all across, every bit across the Atlantic. And what it's currently doing is it's running an AJAX application, and that AJAX application is now pulling in RSS feed. Every channel that I have, all the EPG, the electronic program guide data, is an RSS feed. And now it's adjusting the schedule. So now we have here this wonderful EPG experience, which looks pretty much like the Windows Media Center experience. So let's see whether we can scroll. And we probably can't, because there's this thing in the middle. Oh, which channel did I click? See, it's night in Germany. So I'm not entirely sure what we're going to end up with. And this is, I believe, MTV. I hope nothing more serious. Let me put the stop button right there. Oh, wonderful. See, that's a great show for a German, right? There you have it. I'm sure it's a different movie. So what we're getting here is really it's a live video feed from Germany. Let me just, no! That was a very bad idea. Let me just stop that right there. Yeah, we don't want that. The scrolling is a little off because it's still wiring those things up. Once the cache is properly populated, things are better. That should be safe, right? But CNN is local. You have CNN too, so that's not so interesting. Let's see, let's go there. All right. So for me, this is going to be my solution that I'm going to be running when I'm living in Seattle, right? I have this computer will be at the house of my dad, and this is the way how I can watch all my 35 analog channels, and I'm still working with the digital channels, how I get all those things out. So here's German news. You can turn the sound a little bit.
Das Jahr 2005 bricht schließlich alle traurigen Rekorde. Erstmals in der Geschichte gibt es in 12 Monaten so viele Tropenstürme,
We're not done yet.
Meteorologen die Namen ausgeben.
We're not done yet.
So wurden die letzten beiden Hurricanes des Jahres nach den Anfangsbuchstaben des griechischen Alphabets.
And going to close Media Center, all assuming that it lets me. All right. There's another link. So Media Center is cool, right? If you have a Media Center PC, that's a great experience. You've seen it's all 10-foot UI and all those things. And but what if I'm on the road? So this box here, this Media Center box, we literally unpacked this morning. Like it's completely fresh. That's the box. Okay? So if I end up being somewhere and I have nothing, I need to have a zero footprint client for my experience, which I can rely on that it exists everywhere where I have Windows. So I have this little link here. Hoping that it will work. That link points to an ASX file or ASX stream. ASX is the Windows Media meta format that embeds a so-called HTML view. So you're seeing that the presentation surface here is Windows Media Player.
2005 erreicht Hurricane Stan Mittelamerika. Ist schwächer als seine Vorgänger Rita und Katrina. Trotzdem sind die Folgen katastrophal.
i.e. hosted inside Windows Media Player, and that's something that works out of the box. There's a params.
Durch Stan kommen etwa 2000 Menschen ums Leben.
The TV sound.
Hilfsorganisationen sprechen von der vergessenen Katastrophe des Jahres 2005.
Thank you. And so you can see we have a little bit of a...
Die Region kommt nicht zur Ruhe. Gut 2 Wochen nach Stan kommt...
It's all depending on bandwidth. I'm happy that I got so far, right? I'm going to party tonight. So what you're seeing is the HTML view embedded in Windows Media Player, which I basically throw in through AJAX. What you're also seeing is that there's guide data here. So if I want to know what's going on, right, on the other channels, I just hover over it, and it's all AJAX. It's a complete AJAX app. So I'm just gathering all the RSS data inside that thing, and that's how I populate all the little tooltips. Here's my schedule, so let's just go and expand that. That's the schedule. If I'm interested and say, I really don't want to miss this show, I click this button, and now the back end will have scheduled this for recording. It will go and record it, and then it will show up in the recordings panel where I can consume it then later. So if I look at the, let's say, ARD channel, it's here. And the switch times aren't all that bad if you consider that all this is coming over from Germany, right? Broadband is a different story if you go across the Atlantic. So here, and then there's the all essential, really important story, and of course that is then, and then again, all that depends on whether it lets me. One more try. It doesn't let me. No football today. But then I thought, well, why only live television if we have stuff like Channel 9? So Channel 9 exposes RSS feeds. So I'm integrating the RSS feeds on the server side into the experience. I'm grabbing those, I'm aggregating those feeds. So that I'm getting those feeds on the server side, and I'm changing them a little bit so that they actually work inside the experience. So here we have now basically redirect through my server just to punt up this extra metadata that I need. A Channel 9 feed, and I have on 10, the brand new portal about consumer information. And these feeds here are really not coming from my machine. These feeds here come from the web. These are web streams, and I'm integrating those as well. For web streams, I can go and get the APG data through XML TV, for instance. That's an APG app. From the for all my live channels, I'm getting them from the back end. It's a pluggable provider story right there. So this is a web stream that comes directly from the provider. But all of that is integrated not only in this experience, but it's all integrated into the Windows Media Center experience as well. Everything you see, except the live video stream, because that would be a very big message, right? And we're a messaging platform. But even the videos, at least the live videos, go through a TCP port forwarder inside my app. Everything that you see is pulled through Indigo. Pictures, all the JavaScript that's needed, all the HTML, all the RSS data, all of that is pulled through Indigo channels.
The country's presidential election as neither free nor fair. Foreign ministers on Monday backed sanctions such as...
So the programming model for that is something that uses the extensibility. It's an operation contract. That's how we declare methods as being Indigo or WCF methods, endpoint methods. And I wrote this HTTP method extensibility point, which allows you to map a verb or a method, HTTP method, and an endpoint suffix to a specific method. So if I'm walking up to my server directly, and let's say we are going to go to one service, one channel service, and we're going to go and hit that. So let's go to an ARD, that's the slash. So here's my RSS feed for ARD. So if I'm really interested in all runnings of Tagesschau, that's a wonderful feature now of, see? That's how my RSS gets filtered. So that's my EPG data right there, punted up as RSS. I want to get the logo. Well, there's the logo. Where does the logo come from? Because I'm putting the logo straight into my RSS into my feed. The endpoint where that comes from is /logo, so let's go and look at /logo. Then there's, for instance, /recordings. So all the recordings that I have on that channel, and that channel is fairly safe. And it's all in German anyway, so who would know? Oh, recordings, huh? So there are all my recordings that I have. And I could click on them because I store them as enclosures, which means that with an RSS aggregator which supports enclosures, you would actually go and download all those files if they're pretty big. So I'm embracing all the standards to do that. And EPG data in RSS, that's not too far-fetched because nothing in the specification says that the publication date, right, has to be in the past. I'm putting the date when the show will be happening into publication date because that's where it belongs. It will be published at that time. So I'm using RSS for EPG information, and it just makes a lot of sense. And it would have been totally, well, not totally impossible, but incredibly hard for me to build that application without Indigo, without those dispatch capabilities. Where those dispatch capabilities are only possible because WCF allows me exchanging the whole dispatch wiring. Right? I'm not dispatching here on an action or anything that's contained in the message, but I'm dispatching based on the URI plus the HTTP method. What you've seen is that I can schedule a recording. Well, that's an HTTP post, right? I can actually add guide data from the outside. That's something that the clients don't do. With put and you can delete guide data, and you have complete access to all of that. Oh, and mind that as of 2 hours ago, I posted this revision that I'm currently running on www.newtelevision.tv. New Television is, that name is derived from the company I used to work for. And New Television is sort of the parting gift that I gave to the company before I left. And so you can get it from newtelevision.tv. The source code is there. That may be of interest to you. And the compiled app is there as well. What you will need is the February CTP of the Windows Communication Foundation. You need Visual Studio 2005. And when you have all those things, you will be able to run it. It's a simple install. And mind that the application itself is for non-commercial use only, but the service framework, and there's a separate assembly called Newtelligence.service model extensions. That is BSD licensed, and you can simply use that and take New Television as the sample application for it. And you can simply take that part, the service model extensions, and implement and use them for your application. So to learn more, so what we have as in summary, the web is evolving. We're separating data from visuals. WCF is the universal runtime to give all that data out to all those different sorts of clients, to interconnect services amongst each other. Whether you want to have certain quality of service, then you use SOAP messages. If you want to have very simple client-service integration, as I've done in my experiences, then you want to have POX services. If you have any further questions, I'm the community PM. If you want to do, talks, or if you're in a user group doing work in the community, then I should be talking to you. Either write me email, or I'm going to be in the sandbox area in the next 2 days. So I'm happy to get all the questions and what you like, and I'm going to probably give you a personal walkthrough through the code if you want to, 2 or 3 at a time, and yeah, and come to windowscommunication.net, of course. Did I say that already? We're going to have we have samples there. We're going to have more samples there. We're going to point you to everything that's going on. I also want to point people to what you are doing. So if you're doing extensibility, if you're writing interesting applications with the Windows Communication Foundation, that's the place where I want to link to you, right? So we're interested in hearing what you build with our platform. I think we have an interesting platform that we built. And with that, I have 9 minutes for questions. Thank you. Yes.
So I had a good example of the Core Zen. You asked if anybody had done anything like that.
Okay.
Well, about this time last year, I was looking for a job, and I wanted to move somewhere in the U.S., but I didn't know where. And Craigslist is a great source for jobs, but the problem is it's very localized. So I wrote an app that went through and queried all the Craigslist cities and just very brief summaries, and I was using HTTP compression. It was a really friendly little app, but it would do it in real time. But what happened is I got banned.
Oh.
And any app like this that you do gets banned because the Craig Newmarker runs it is very particular about how he likes things done, and so that didn't end up too well.
I understand that you get banned. If you go and spider the entire site, they get suspicious. If you do so very frequently and if you spider the entire site if you try to do that within 10 minutes, I would probably ban you too. If you were hitting my site every time you do that, every time you want to look something up, I would probably ban you too. If you are okay with spidering the site in a day and just cache all that data, that's okay.
The difference is, though, that it's a user demand. I mean, there's certain use cases for Craigslist that are pretty legitimate. Like, hey, I want to move somewhere in the U.S. I don't know where, but
sure.
I need a job. This is a legitimate use.
And it's very easy to tell what the outcome of that is. If someone keeps their business closed for that sort of thing, they'll get less popular. That's the whole thing. So if you are building a classified ads service and you are not allowing to be aggregated, it's not a very wise business decision. So if they ban you, they are probably on the way to get marginalized.
Right. Yeah, it didn't seem like a wise business decision because, I mean, ultimately the people who get the jobs benefit, and the people, posting
I'm with you.
benefit.
We don't need to argue. We don't need to argue about this. It's not a very wise decision of the provider not to allow that.
Right.
Next question.
Hey, I just am curious as to how you see WCF fitting into IIS. Is it an alternative to IIS?
No.
Do you want to bypass it, or what?
IIS.
I'm sorry, but you're talking about REST, a lot of like web service stuff. I just wanted your input on the relationship between the two.
Okay, there's two specialized runtimes, sort of, living inside of IIS. Right? IIS is a lot of things. It's first of all a thing to serve up static content. Second of all, it's an application host. It's an application host for ASP.NET, for rich HTML applications, and it's a host for the Windows Communication Foundation for rich services applications. IIS works with us, and we work with IIS because they host us. So if you need to have a manageable, rich process model, you have it all right there. So they're hosting us. We have a special hosting mode, and we anticipate that that's going to be the default hosting mode for most applications. Well, we live in IIS. Now, that said, in Vista, IIS is breaking up into a lot of different modules. One of them, which also comes from the IIS family, is WAS, W-A-S, Windows Activation Services. And that's a rich process model, which is coming from the IIS space, which hosts applications that, not only applications that are running on HTTP, but also on any arbitrary other protocol that you want to plug into it. So if you want to host an application, just like we're currently using HTTP services, you put a service file in there, but you want to do that also for NetTCP or for all the other bindings, you can do that with WAS, with Vista Longhorn Server going forward.
Does the asynchronous pluggable protocol, does the Atlas framework go through that? Does the HTTP request object go through that?
It's just that particular sample that we just had there is just the show what can be done, right?
Okay.
So it plugs into, the way it plugs into the infrastructure underneath, into WinINet.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the
right,
protocol.
and then whatever uses WinINet can use it. We're going to make the source code available on on windowscommunication.net. So if it's not there yet, it'll be there within a few days, and then you can simply get it from there.
Hi.
Hi.
The last time I was in Tokyo, I got a demo of a system in Japan for Sony that they were building called Location-Free Television, and it was about, at that time, $7,000. And what you just demoed is essentially the same thing. You have a server at home, you can watch TV. I was wondering, was that a part of your inspiration? Oh, I'm not with Sony, so I don't care.
No. Part of my inspiration is purely and only football. Okay? And
a worthwhile inspiration.
So the back end, just to make it clear, I'm not doing any of the video rendering, okay? So there's a $70 product that I'm using, which is using web services, which is called Beyond TV from Snapstream Media. It's a $70 package which I'm using, and it's completely web service programmable. It's sort of like a little TV engine. It has its own experience. It's not as rich in support and things what you can do as Media Center, but it turns out to be that it's really good at that thing, and that's media streaming. So that's what I'm using it for, and I'm using that at the back end of the app. And then I layer all the additional functionality, the REST and RSS and all that functionality on top of it.
Yeah,
so I added probably 35,000 lines to it.
And probably the total package, with off-the-shelf components is much less than $7,000. You could probably do that for about a couple grand. And a bunch of Sony execs are crying somewhere.
So that app is, you get all the source. If you want to build your own thing with it, that's fine, right? You get all the source. I wrote a little bit of documentation. You need to get Beyond TV. The video card that you just saw is a WinTV PCI card from 1998, which I bought on eBay for $10. Right? It doesn't have to be. So total cost minus my time, which I gave in, because I wanted to. So your effective total cost of setting this up, given you have a PC, is going to be about $100.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, and you're getting all this code because I wrote it once. Why should I? You know how that goes. If you want to sell this, well, then you need to talk to Intelligence. Yes, please.
How does WCF compare to its competitors like Apache Axis or something else along those lines?
How does it compare?
Yes.
I think we have a better programming experience. I think the story here is that we make one programming experience for a lot of stories that Axis doesn't cover. Like if you want to do reliable, durable messaging, we have a story for that. We have MSMQ. Well, in the Java space, for instance, you would use JMS for that. If you want to do binary optimized communication, so you're really concerned about wire footprint and performance, you would probably go RMI in the Java space. Here, use our stuff. So whatever the communication scenario is, we're supporting that. So Axis would be the thing to compare Axis against would be ASP.NET Web Services and Web Service enhancements. But we're just covering a lot more than they do. All right, time's up. Actually, in 20 seconds, so that's...
Actually, I have one quick thing.
Okay,
The gentleman
good.
that was talking about Craigslist and the mashup and the job searching and everything, actually, I work for CurveBuilder.com, and we expose RSS feeds. So if you're interested in talking to me, I can show you how to do that. Now, don't hammer us every minute or we'll shut you down too, but I'd be glad to show you how you can do that with us.
There's your connection. See, it's a conversation. So I want to talk to you later. When you can find me, I'm going to be in the sandbox area, hopefully. Now, if all the nervousness about my demo, I'm probably going to chill out for 20 minutes. But then I'm happy to talk to you today, tomorrow. There's going to be a party and all that, so just hit me up. Bye.